Hello, ladies and gentlemen, or anything in between. I'm Ben from Second Dynasty with our final stream for the year, and something brand new to feast your eyes upon. Something new and something old at the same time. Let me see, I have to make sure that I've got my microphone on, yes, and it looks like the control panel that I have here doesn't actually have the chat built in, so I need to get the chat up. There we go. Hello Tamsin. Hi that blasted Summerflange. Hi ArnaQ DHD. Welcome to the stream. That blasted Summerflange is straight in with a question. Which is nice to see. And the question being, so is there a specific Macross fighter that inspired you for this? The answer is no. This is a JAS-41 Vampyren. This is actually the third iteration of a design that I made in 2012 the last time. And actually 2009, my very first animation project was based on an idea for this craft. This is considerably different than my original version. And we'll talk about that briefly before we get into the Traveller stuff we're going to do today, but in a second I need to refresh this just to make sure all of this is going well. Let's see. So I might try and find the original. I know I sent it to John just a day or two ago, so maybe I can find it easier that way. Let's see, go to there and then so this was from it's on the wrong screen. I'll download it. This is all like has a copyright sort of watermark, I guess. I was using this as a demonstrator in my old company for, let's see, it downloaded, but where did it download to? This should work. So yeah, this is a video I made for my old company as a sort of like preview of the concept. I'll restart it. So this is all animated, control surfaces. You can see here that this is actually a forward swept wing variant. Of course, this is nowhere near printable, but a few of the concepts I wanted to have in there. I don't think the wings go in or out in this one. And I do have an old scene somewhere. So where did I put my chat? Not there. Not there. Not there. Actually, that might be it. There we go. I found it. So no 5803. Is this the time to sign the NDA for what? So yeah, this is my own design. It does belong to me, and this version obviously does not have a variable forward swept wing. The original design had a wing that came out here. This is very much more, I guess, F-22 inspired, NGAD inspired. So this is my idea of what SAAB would come up with if they were making a 6th generation or a 5th generation, for that matter, fighter. And originally, it's supposed to have like a combined scramjet, ramjet configuration, so it's supposed to be capable of high Mach speeds. Of course, you could argue that the cannons aren't really great for that. There's a number of issues which will come up with it. But this, or at least part one of this, is going to be January's offerings for our tribe. So I'm in the process of converting this to 28 millimeters. I'm actually very close to the point where we'll actually split it up. But I do have some issues. I'm going to turn off the lighting here and go through it a bit. I'm just going to actually boost the lighting in the scene just a little. Turn up the exposure to 1, just so we can see some of these details a little bit better. I've gone with much smaller extrusions than I normally do. It's only 0.1 of a millimeter. And part of the reason for this is just the fact that it, you know, you don't want, it's kind of in theme if you've got a stealth fighter, right? Will this be compatible with the Maelstrom weapons and hardpoints? Eventually, yes. So if I removed this, I originally had some of those weapon systems, and in fact I think they're hidden in the scene somewhere. You can kind of see the original shape of the hole that I've taken in and changed. My goal, because this is to get to a point where we're going to use all the Operation Maelstrom weapons, and yes, it is going to be compatible with it. It's not going to be compatible with that next week. So I am undecided yet if I'm going to put this out. You can see like the landing gear is in the positions where it's supposed to be, but I haven't quite figured out how to print this yet. And a part of the issue with the stealth sort of shape with all these sort of like triangles and jagged edges is that they actually create some serious printability issues for us. So for example, we would have to have a split right here, and then a split in the middle of this thing, and then a split probably somewhere here, just to get the different sections of this engine going. And I was kind of like in the process of trying to light these engines for a cool shot. I do love the shape of this. I think it's got some interesting angles. I think it's going to look great 3D printed, but I might have to thicken up the canards. And then there are actually, you know, some weapons bays here, and the idea is to have, yes, some, I've tested it already, it will fit 3 medium Operation Maelstrom missiles here. I'll probably have some custom sized weapons as well. For this one, that will be compatible with other Maelstrom weapons, so maybe some missiles that look a little bit more conventional, for example. This wheel isn't really in the space it's meant to be at the moment, but yeah, when you design something for 3D printing, you've kind of got to, I actually bake in some things that really would be decals, like for example the warning stripes for the lower engines here. Ironically, these would probably actually be quite safe if they're scramjets, because they won't activate until you're, you know, Mach 3 plus maybe. But yeah, just, you know, internal weapons bays, kind of keeping with the SAAB model. Since the Viggen, they've had the canards on their ships, fighters. It does break with tradition in the sense of that it's a twin engine. But yeah, I don't know if this is a practical fighter. It's certainly more practical than when I had the folding out wings, but still. And I do miss, you know, being able to animate this. These rings here are actually old control objects. I don't think they're linked up anymore, but for example, maybe the canards are still on. Let's see. See, this is a form of animation where you can kind of rig Maya to do a few different cool things. Let's see. Do I not have anything for the canards? Maybe the landing gear will work. Yeah. So they're still programmed to come down, right? So this is kind of like a form of rigging. That blasted camouflage asks 2 questions. The second question is, I'd love to see a dorsal hull variant that allows you to put a single cannon like a Macross gun pod in the bottom center. I mean, that would block access to the weapons bays. So, Sorry, I've had a hell of a day, guys. I've been running around getting all the food and stuff for our New Year's celebrations. And then on top of that, oh, you can see here that these are actually animated. So if I just run through the timeline, you can see some of the... Oh, the engines are still animated. That's cool. I did not realize that. So that's all of the things. And the original, you know, had some shapes that you just can't make physical. It would be like soft body objects, that sort of thing. It was actually a decent rig when I sort of like still knew what I was doing as far as rigging is concerned. Like, I have changed the engines here. I figured out how we're going to connect these panels. And then roughly how we're going to split up the hull, probably into maybe 6 pieces, something like that. But there'll be some challenges figuring out the landing gear. I'm not going to try and make an actual folding landing gear. It's just going to be, you'll have a fold away piece and then you'll have an extended piece. So you can kind of choose whether they're going to be out or not. So yeah, that is coming in January. I've got enough to kind of make cool renders for the tribes image that's going up on the 1st, I guess. By the way, we still have an ongoing winter sale, 40% off. Check out seconddynasty.com for details. Front engines need to be closed. They are not... the front engines? Okay. So the lower one's a scramjet. It's meant, like, honestly, I've taken out some of the geometry. The original version, maybe I can actually save this and then open the older scene. This one. So we can see basically the same rig that I was just showing you. So this was quite different, and it had, you know, the engines being fed in here. I'm not an actual engineer. Can't fly north with open engine because of birds. Yeah, that definitely would chop up some birds for sure. In any case, we're not going to get that detailed. I can already see that this is going to be less forgiving than a lot of my other designs. But yeah, I'm not trying to be dismissive or anything like that. I just wanted to show off this old rig. I don't think we have any links to the... Let's see, if I go to AI fuselage there, and if we just change that to source images. Why didn't that turn up? 1, 2, that's it. Oh, I've got the base shader on, that's why. Yeah, it was quite dark. So none of this is really great stuff. It's a very old scene. From, like I said, from 2012. We've got a bunch of other stuff in here. You can see it was the wrong scale compared to 28mm. But yeah, that control rig, you could do all kinds of cool stuff with it. So if I selected this, for example, we could, you know, engines down or up. We could do reverse versions. We could do side to side. So these were 3D vectored. We could do banking. We could do every surface going up or down. Could do air braking. We could open the bay doors. Or we could extend the wings. This didn't work well. You can see there that they're extended, they're in, but they're not in the right positions. So yeah, very, very old work, way before. Let's see, that blasted Samophlange says, sure, it just feeds matter into the antimatter reaction engine. And then Eric DeVoe says, maybe it's bird-powered. Buzzard collectors, I'll show myself out. Very good. Okay, so that is Vampyren. Now, let's switch projects to Traveller, and then we're going to talk about Traveller. So, I have just got to make a product file for the slow boat. It is actually done. John handed it over on Wednesday. I just forgot to create the product. I realized just now. I also have some bills I have to sort out when I'm finished streaming. But we can go ahead and look at the recent work. So first, I want to look at... No, we're not going to save this. Wouter van Rompuy. Love the design. Will there be a flying stand for it? Yeah, we'll make it compatible with our stand. So it is really cool to see people engaging with this. So yeah, this is the slow boat, but what we're actually working on is today is going to be the cradle. And this is just all that we had to work with. Of course, if I think the 10-ton, where did it go? The civilian gig here is the model that we used. Not the best model to test with because it does have one key difference from all of the other ships, and that is that the cargo bay isn't here. So, okay. Let's go back 2 or 3 months when we had our last Traveller campaign. I think we did it in October, or finished in October. And this is one of the first stretch goals that we had. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the process of doing that. So, when we create a stretch goal, what we're actually creating is a visualization of how it might appear. And then, of course, there is the finished printable product, which takes a hell of a lot more work. So, for example, right now, you guys just saw the JAS-41 Vampyren, which I designed years ago and I've made the 3rd iteration of now, this week. But taking that model I just showed you and actually getting it physically printed out is a much longer process. So I probably still need to spend like 3, maybe 4 full work days to get it printable to the point where, you know, it's a product for you guys. Anytime we can do a tribes and keep the product to somewhere around a week or less of production is, you know, sort of the sweet spot of where it's worth that extra time to take away from larger projects. So, and yes, Eric brings up a good question in the chat. Is it compatible with TNG? Now, this was the concept that we had. These are designed to work with our modular tiles. So, to the base, yes. Now, this brought up an interesting question. Obviously, we need an airlock here and some infrastructure, and this isn't going to fit every single Traveller ship. Some people have brought up the fact of, well, how do you load the cargo? And I didn't even think about it when we did this. So I have to find a balance now of what we've promised versus, you know, what we can do with it versus what's practical. At the moment, the small craft campaign, profitable. Finally, our first profitable project in several years, actually. Probably pre-Traveller. I want to keep it that way, which means these stretch goals need to be fairly simple to implement. Now, there's a reason why we've had delays with the stretch goals. Part of that is Albin, the project that he's on. It keeps getting extended. And also I've had John working on other stuff in the meantime. Um, and I think John will do some of the miniatures. Album will focus on the Rampart stuff. I'll continue to focus on some additional variants, whilst also focusing on what's over the horizon. Because ideally, with a company, I want to be in a position where I can create the visualizations, and then my team can take that to a physical print, so that I can move on. So it's like, this is the bare bones of what we've promised, but obviously it's not enough. Now, am I willing to take this all the way so that there are, access areas so you can load baggage or cargo? No, not at the moment. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, and we still need to figure out what we're doing with Traveller next year. We're definitely not looking to do like campaigns, so more like the Tribes style, or a Tribes add-on or something like that might be the way that we go. But we haven't got there yet. And until Album gets back at work, that we sort of clear our schedule and that sort of thing, we have a vague idea of what we're doing next year, but not all the details. So anyway, I just wanted to show this in the original form, because I don't actually have any of the small craft in the next scene I'm going to show you. So, as Eric hinted at with the question, is it compatible with TNG, meaning Starship The Next Generation, which was our update of our science fiction tiles? This, of course, got me thinking about the fact that we have lots of Traveller designs, but they're not OpenLock compatible. So, at the start of the week, moving into this, assuming that Maya hasn't actually crashed at the moment, it is taking its sweet time. I wonder why. Could be some Dropbox preferences here. So it did make me realize that we don't have Traveller tiles in that respect. So I actually spent a lot of time converting Traveller into Starship The Next Generation tiles. Now, I haven't got a ton of it so far, and we still have a couple of issues that we need to consider. Issue 1, the ships we built have partitions. They don't have thick walls like OpenLock tiles have. The bulkheads, even, are not that particularly thick. Otherwise, we would have less printability issues with the iris doors and whatnot. So, how do we implement our partitions versus OpenLock walls? And the answer is to have sort of the walls built so that you could optionally have like hull or opposite walls, and having these sort of like slots in the wall so that you can still put in partitions if you just put in the base tiles. So adding some modularity into Traveller. Now, obviously, this is beyond the scope of what we were promising. So this will get baked into a future Traveller product. However, what we have so far is going to be based on this sort of design. So the long and short of it is it compatible with Starship The Next Generation? Yes. We also are going to, in the future, make Traveller TNG tiles. And this is just a sort of starting off point. So there will be items that will be compatible, like, for example, these new stairs we're going to build. I'm in the process of building. They too will be designed to print from the same sort of angles where we prefer to print with items on their sides. And there will be options for adding partitions at a certain point. We'll try to keep it modular so you can determine the size of these passages. I'd like to have variants in the future where you have, for example, viewport windows and whatnot. But to start with, we're going to keep things simple because I want to focus on delivering what we've promised and not letting this turn into my next delta where it's like, oh, I'll just make 1 or 2 modifications, and all of a sudden I've changed 95% of the parts, or spent 3 weeks on something when I should really be focusing on getting these deliveries out. Now, to some degree, I'm a creative person, so I kind of go a little bit towards where the muse sends me. But yeah, we're trying to figure this out and deliver the things that we've promised. Now, there are quite a few stretch goals to get through. Fortunately, most of them are fairly simple to implement. The really hard ones, that's going to be like the alternative cockpits, that sort of thing. So yeah, let me catch up with the chat a little bit. So let's see. Going back, that blasted Samaflange asks, can this cradle be made in separate pieces so you can print out as many of the skateboard ramp cradle and expand forever? Yes, it already does that. That way you can make launch tubes. Yes, you can. And actually, you could probably make a nice little starfighter cradle to sort of launch it Battlestar Galactica style or something like that. Then you can make chairs attached on the side where you want them. You could have the lower area where the doors are, and you could just print more of those to make a cargo loading area. Yes, there are options here. It won't make a traveler train set. Not unless you want it to just travel in a straight line. Corners and stuff are a nightmare with OpenLog. It could, easily be used if you're trying to imitate like the start of a tube system or something like that, maybe. Traveler TNG is a Frontier campaign. The thing is, I can see it happening, but honestly, we've got the Delta 2400 coming on the 6th of February, which is the all-new interior version with updated engines, and I'll probably do some whole work. I'm kind of on the fence. I think I might turn it into, a double-deck variant instead, so that it is different from the original Delta. Then the other thing I'm thinking of too is that in April we'll be having our alien-style shuttle campaign, and then hopefully by that point we've reached enough sort of a sales level that we can carry on to September when we do the Nostromo, and that's going to be so massive. That's basically our year and all I have time for. Where there are slots is sort of like more on the tribe side, but then again, it's like, how much room? How much needs to be organized? I only have so much bandwidth, and despite all the help I get from John and Albin and Lisa, it's still me making all of the decisions, and it's still me sort of like that's focused on the art direction. So, let's see. That blasted Samaflange asks or states, Traveler tiles would make a great thing to add to Traveler tribes. Yeah, pushing for the Traveler tribes again, yes. Yeah. The Traveler tribes thing is a big question. Because it's also a commitment. It's also kind of like, there was a considerable amount of resources that went into our tribes, and there still is. Like, if you look at the fighter I'm doing now, that's still a week or more of my time from every month. Now, that doesn't mean that every month's going to be that big. Ideally, I'd like myself to spend about 3 days a month on the tribe release. Obviously, we have the back catalogue, but I'm just trying to make, a vehicle that feels like a steal for a $5. And yeah, it's just a challenge to sort of figure out where the balance is. The Traveler Tribes thing is like, does it need to be its own thing? Can it be an add-on to mine? How much extra bookkeeping is it to keep a track of everything? Can we sustain monthly releases? And whilst, you know, there's plenty of aliens that I could commission that Blasted Camouflage to do or something like that, it is... yeah, I don't know. I'm still waiting to hear back from Mark about miniatures. It's hard to know where things are at. I kind of need to have a meeting with him early next year. And yeah, apparently, no, I need to leave that at that. There's stuff going on behind the scenes that I've got to sort out first. Then it's okay, next question. Have you considered making Traveler semiotics as printable cosplay props? What I mean is life-size printables that you can print off and glue above your bathroom door and such. I think there are people that would love that. Possibly. Although the semiotics that we have are quite simplified. Because they're meant to fit into a... I think 4mm is the width at scale. But yeah, they could be scaled up, sure, but like, these are pretty simple. And really they're 3D because we just want to make something that's easy to paint rather than, you know, you're trying to muck around with different symbols. Now, these need changing. And then what is an appropriate airlock size is a question. I kind of like these steps. And when I did work on this in the last couple of days, I really did kind of get into the mood of it. So that was nice to get back to, because I really felt like, oh, cool, yeah, I'm into this. Which sometimes is a struggle, especially with Traveler. Because, you know, it's not my stuff, and then there's the added pressure of making sure, you know, people are happy with what I'm making. And it is pressure. It really is. So, yeah, there's a couple of things I'd like to do. I think one of them at the moment, looking at this, is I want to extend this step to about here. And ideally, I'd like to get some semiotics in, but we'll see how this looks. So I'm going to delete some of these. And then, yeah, I will look in the chat again soon if there are comments or anything to consider. But at the moment, I just want to grab all of this. There we go. And then I think we don't want that, but we can cut this. Actually, we can invert this. And then we're just going to use our pivot points. I'm going to center the pivot, and then we'll manually move it with a snap. And I'm actually going to set it to a different point in a known location. So if we want to move this out to there, why is that not snapping? It's being finicky. So if I snap that to there, you can see it's all aligned. So where does this end? There. We're going to make sure the patterns are right. See, this is going to create a bit of an issue because technically we want this to be there for the repeatable ground pattern. So what's going on here? Okay, so for this one we need to get rid of that back area. I'm just going to select over there and along here. And we should be able to delete there. What you can see has happened here is we've gotten misaligned. These are not properly offset. And really the issue is that this needs to be here to be properly aligned. And that does bring us right up to the edge of where this is going, which is great. We can work with this. let's see. License issue, Eric Anderson says. Yeah, it could be. We're not licensed for creating, semiotics per se. There could be licensing issues with miniatures, character miniatures in particular. So I'm waiting to hear back. My understanding is that Mongoose tried to do miniatures a couple of years back and ended up cancelling a Kickstarter. So I wonder if maybe they have plans for that again. But I don't know. Just to be incredibly frank. Yeah, I really don't know what the deal is. It might be a non-event. It might be a case of, we're free to do 3D printables, but not physical prints, because I did get a question from a guy who cast in metal, if there was, some way we could do Traveller miniatures in metal together or something like that. And yeah, I got different sort of feedback, I guess, from Mark. So I don't want to step on anyone's toes or anything like that. It's just a case of I don't know at the moment. And I certainly don't want to, become a competitor to Mongoose. I'd rather that, our products feel like they can synergize with Mongoose stuff, rather than create some unnecessary conflict. I mean, 3D printing is our realm. The whole physical model thing was tried as a one-off thing. Technically, we got permission to do licenses, so licensed printers can do physical prints. Mark hasn't said very much. He is a man of few words. My impression is not that he's bothered by the direction we've taken. I think if anything else, he'd rather like to see us doing even more Traveller stuff, but I would like to do some of our own stuff as well. Will Richards is talking about magnets. Frank Beans, come on everyone, click the like button. Yes, indeed, do that. Like and subscribe. Something like that. I'm supposed to, encourage. But yeah, I think you can tell from the fighter we're releasing next month. That's something I've been passionate about. I got into fightercraft because of Macross. I still, have a huge passion for that sort of thing. It just, when I get in the mood to make my own stuff, it just feels so much easier. Whereas whenever I'm with Traveller, I'm like, okay, in my design process, I'm like, what are people expecting? How can I make this, honor the original design? How can I make this a better version of what was originally out there? Because as a Traveller fan myself, and as an artist, I'm often frustrated by the art choices for Traveller. Now that isn't something, that bothers everyone. What's going on there? Why is that not lining up? Is that just not? And consequently, what I've discovered is that for myself, I spend way too much time on that sort of stuff. And I think I am less effective when doing Traveller. It's something I'm going to find out. Will the Nostromo take me as long as a Beowulf to make? I bloody well hope not. I don't have that kind of time. So it kind of like is a proof of concept too. Can I make my own? I don't want to say completely original. It will be an original design, but like obviously, if I'm calling the ship the Nostromo, there is some intent behind it. That being, that the ship looks like it belongs in the alien universe, even if it's not necessarily actually an official alien ship. So it should look like it's like a smaller cousin of a Nostromo type bison vessel or something like that. Not that it is truly, I still need to walk a fine line between design language and actually making a full-on rip-off. It was the same with the Notanante. I had to reach a certain point where it feels like you can make a ship that feels like the Rocinante. Aesthetically it looks quite similar, it uses a similar design language, it feels like it fits into the Expanse without Amazon breathing down my neck about the design. So there's all of that kind of thing to consider. And yeah, this is one of the nuances that I think there's a lot of armchair lawyers. It's been a frustration in the past. I've certainly gotten comments like Disney's going to sue you. I've gotten comments that not only is the Delta an exact ripoff, like a ripoff of the Millennium Falcon, but that it's an exact ripoff. Now, I have to question anyone that thinks that the asymmetry of the Falcon looks like the symmetry of the Delta. Yes, it's designed to look like it could be a knockoff YT-100 ship, but distinct. Original enough. It feels like it fits in without being plagiarism. An homage, if you will, as opposed to plagiarism. And that's a fine line. And I know other artists that are happy to just make stuff and not really worry about that sort of stuff, but I've got a business with employees and I kind of owe it to them to make sure that we're doing stuff above board. So I certainly want to keep things ambiguous enough that people can understand, hey, this ship is a nod to the Nostromo, or this ship is made to fit into this universe without it being or having legal ramifications. Let's see what people are saying about all of this word stew. That blasted Samouflage says, I'm not going to lie, I wish you had a license from Mongoose instead of Far Future Enterprises, but that's another conversation. It could have simplified things in a way. I think though the royalty I would have to pay on it would be even higher than what it is now, and at the moment it's borderline unaffordable. It's certainly, if it was higher than what it is, it's not, I don't think it's a bad deal considering, but it's still like, that is my margin of profit. That is exactly my margin of profit. So I've spent 2 years operating at a slight loss, and that's not sustainable for me. So yeah, that has been an issue, and that is because in part of the traveler license. And why is that taking so long? Insert. There we go. I think the computer needs a reboot. So yeah, it is a little frustrating and hard to navigate and figure out sometimes. Let's see. Will Richard says, I talked to Mark at Gen Con and he really likes what you're doing. That's really nice to hear. I myself, I don't think I've had a video conversation with Mark for 18 months or more. Maybe 2 years at this point. I think he likes the stuff I send him, but his emails tend to be extremely short. I might send 5 questions and he'll answer 1 or 2. And then, look, let's be honest. He's in his 70s. He's a retired man. He should enjoy his life. So as long as I'm not stepping over any boundaries, I'm happy to be doing this. That blasted Samophone says, I know Modifius actually sells STLs for Star Trek and Fallout, so some companies have jumped into 3D printing. Yeah, I wonder how they actually do. We clearly need more high quality Traveller aliens. I mean, the Hive miniature you release is clearly the best ever, said with absolutely no bias at all. It's great, and we do need those things, and I think there's room for it. It's a question of how do we do it? Do we do a character miniatures Traveller? Do we do character miniatures and Traveller TNG? Where do we fit that in to our year? How much stuff do we have to do ahead of time? Because if I do character miniatures, I'm going to need to commission most of the work. And that means, higher upfront costs. If I'm the person creating the designs, I have some control over and flexibility over a budget, for example. But there's only so much you can do with miniatures. Hey, Dalton! Dalton turned up. Someone retracted a message from Blind Alien Productions. Dalton says, do an iconic Traveller ship, i.e. any alien Traveller ship. A non-iconic. That does not make business sense to me whatsoever. Will Richard says, will there only be maybe 3 different versions of the Hive as in miniature? You definitely come in a close third. The Yerstromo. Eric DeVoe says, I would love to see more of your original designs and that would work in the Traveller universe. I used the Beta Centauri as a Zodani ship in my campaign. That's cool. I never envisaged it as a Zodani ship, but I can see it working with that. Will Richard says, it's in the style of, but is definitely fair use. All of the Second Dynasty stuff is, in my mind, Traveller compatible. I mean, Traveller technically covers a very broad range of science fiction, so yes, it can work. That blasted Samophage says, as a fellow creative, I prefer seeing new designs as opposed to rip-offs of copyrighted materials. That's fine, but I'm also trying to make money, and I know that not only am I trying to, I need to, and that means having wide audience appeal, and ideally making stuff that works with games that people actually play. And that is one of the large issues with generic sci-fi. And I think it's actually, there's a case to say that, alien stuff is even worse in that regard, because everyone has a different idea about what an alien should look like. Some people want bizarre otherworldly creatures. Other people want, Asari babes. And it can be anywhere in the gamut of possibilities. It's like, one of the frustrations of science fiction is that there are so many different styles and possibilities that it's almost limiting, because people have different kinds of tastes. So sticking to something that they know and already love is kind of taking away some of the guesswork and risk. And I'm not in a position, my company's not in a position to take huge risks anymore. In fact, I've been taking huge risks for 2 years, and it's not overall working out that great. Like, it's not bad, but I've not been profitable the last 2 years. Not by much. It's nothing that's going to, make me have to mortgage my house or anything like that. Maybe like 10 grand, that sort of thing. But I can't keep doing it every year, We have operating costs and all that sort of thing. So part of just returning to original content or stuff that I love is A, sort of reinvigorating my passion, and B, actually trying to see if that model still works, because the last time we actually did it was Sleipnir, and I think that was 2020, 2021, something like that. Let's see. Frank Bean says, any ship can fit into Traveller. The Imperium alone has over 10,000 shipyards, and they have been cranking out ships for thousands of years. Everything imaginable has been made. Yes, indeed. Will Richards says, Mark is a terse person. A terse person, okay. I mean, he's a good bloke as far as I can tell. Like I said, I've only had a couple of hours of contact with him overall. Dalton says, if you can make a non-iconic, it will become iconic. That is flattering. Tamsin says, Frank, don't think it's that many shipyards. The third Imperium has about 11,000 systems and only... Yeah. Anyway, Traveller semantics is what's being discussed. There could be many shipyards per system, yeah. There are many options there, and not to mention Traveller is not just the third Imperium. There are other alien species, presumably with their own multitude of shipyards. But yeah, we have our potential here. And Dalton, I think you came in late, but here's the start of, I guess, Traveller the Next Generation tiles, so modular tiles. Just, I don't know when they're going to get implemented just yet, so we need to create some more semiotics. The direction of the tiles is a bit of a nuisance. I just ripped these off so that, you know, I mean, there's no, this is the symbol for fresher. There's no fresher on this wall. We need to figure out a way to integrate our whatchamacallits, the partition system. So we need something similar to like these walls with these parts. With a capitalistic monopoly, one shipyard per system is possible. And that is very human. Tamsin says, you deleted the comment I was replying to. It's alright, we got the general gist. Tamsin, Will Richards says to Tamsin, the Zordani and Varga, etc. don't have shipyards. They must have. Anyway, in any case, the general gist of Will's statement stands. There are so many shipyards and so many ship variants in the Third Imperium that whatever I make can fit into it. And then, of course, there are different eras, and then you can have, systems that were formerly a part of the Empire that have devolved and maybe had to, restart technology so your expand-style ships can fit back into it. It is fairly flexible as a system. It's not really, the Enterprise D versus, ships from the original series. Kind of difference in power levels. So, yeah, it's not that bad. In the Traveller system, it's a little bit more generic in that sense. So you could, in theory, have something like a Traveller style ship with why do I keep saying Traveller style? I meant expand style ship that fits or slots into, Traveller without it being out of place. And I think the same could be said for, an alien style ship, hopefully. It still has artificial gravities. They are a lot more, about the engines, I guess, and power systems, taking up a huge amount of room in those ships. I did a general layout, giving it a bunch of different rooms, and yeah, in general, the size and scale of it was considerable, but most of it is sort of engines and those sorts of systems. Let's see. So I'm just trying to dig out these semiotics so that we can recycle them. So this should be a copy. Now, I'm going to have to rebuild some parts of this because, actually, I'm going to just cut this entire corner out. Delete that, and then we'll... These are the semiotics we actually want. We've got... Actually, we don't want this one. We want a different version of that. So, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this corner. Take that out. And then what we'll actually do is center the pivot, which should get us along this line. And then we're going to mirror this. And we're just basically going to keep this frame. So I might just grab this semiotic, we'll expand out, delete, and we just want, I think from this position onwards, like so. And then we can maybe delete the rest of it. Let's see, delete this. So if we combine this, we end up, you know, with that floor pattern. The other thing too is we don't want this middle section, so I'm gonna... And the reason why is that the pattern doesn't work like this on the version we're working on. So let's see. Good conversation today, guys. I like this. I like the interaction. Oh, it was Frank talking about the Imperium. Guys, look, it's the gist that's important, not the details. This is a hard lesson I've had to learn about Traveller. Because I think I have preconceived notions of Traveller too, or like, I've always heard stories about, you know, sort of, almost, savant levels of focus on, you know, systems and not systems as in like gaming systems or that sort of thing, but more like an overemphasis on mechanics and how things would work and all that sort of thing. It is ultimately just science fiction. And everyone's table is also different, right? I've run Traveller before and not used much of the Third Imperium at all. Like, I've integrated, like, Bubblegum Crisis, of all things, and Macross. Because for some reason my players had never seen even Robotech. So I kind of integrated elements of that and, you know, Space Pirate Harlock, Captain Harlock and stuff, and yeah, just doing a very different thing. So you can do almost anything. But the point remains, there is a place for my designs in Traveller, no matter if those designs are official Traveller products or not. That's at least the spirit of what I understood the point to be. So yeah, I'm trying to get these semiotics in. Some of it looks successful, some of it not. So we're going to have to do a bit of a custom job here. But I think the end result, you know what, before we do anything else, I'm going to save out this as a copy, just because we might want a version in the future that doesn't have this stuff in it. So we have to figure out what we're getting rid of and what we're keeping. So I would say with this one, we get rid of some more of these little bits and bobs. Hopefully this isn't just boring for people. Is this correctly offset? It looks like it is centered, at least. Yeah, let's see. Eric DeVoe says, I discovered Second Dynasty via the Type S campaign. Not sure how I missed you guys till then. Well, I mean, it's been a small industry, but welcome. That blasted Samouflage, I mean, welcome from several years back. That blasted Samouflage, science fiction needs more representation for tabletop games. Traveller is not really known in game circles. Mongoose is at least trying to jump into social media, but so few play it, it seems. I think Mongoose is a fairly solid system. I think Traveller is great, but I think really what it has going for it is its history, that it was played so much over the 40 years it's existed. I guess 45 years, really. And so it does have some recognition. A lot of gamers have heard of it, if not played it. But is it the best science fiction system? I don't know. That's debatable. And it also depends on whether or not you consider like 40K to be science fiction or fantasy. Because there are certainly elements of Warhammer that are beyond, like more fantastical, really. So let's try getting rid of some more of these. We've created a little bit of a hole here, but we're going to reconstruct that anyway. And I think we get rid of this one. That didn't make too much of a difference, actually. I'm a bit surprised. This one also, get that gone. That. And we're just gradually filling in the blanks here, so that we can eventually just see the semiotics underneath. That's what we're looking for. Let's see. Science fiction. Sorry, I read that one. Will Richard says, I would love to see a Starship campaign for a modular exterior skin of a ship so that we can make our own, like with Legos, but your blocks. That's kind of what Chimera was about. We could have taken it further than we didn't. I think we've taken it a long way, considering the fact that we have, I think, 5 ships based on that design at the moment. Frank Bean says, everyone views Traveller differently. I have had a hard time not seeing space just packed with ships of all types and sizes. Will Richard says, Traveller has been known to cause flame wars of epic proportion. Yeah, I can see that happening, especially when you get, like, I mean, fantasy games can be quite nerdy, but science fiction games in particular, I think, achieve a completely different level of nerdiness. And, you know, that was always, like, one of the huge big differences growing up when, you know, science fiction was not really popular the way that it is now in our culture. Oh wait, does that not match? Is it not lined up properly? Oh, it's not. There we go. Did that slot in? No, it didn't. I think I've got my pivot point wrong. I'm having a bit of an issue with the pivot point tools at the moment. I think honestly my PC kind of needs a restart. So yeah, I mean, obviously people fight with a greater passion, and I think because it's science fiction, there's also a certain degree of, like, there's the possibility of, you know, more realism. It's not like fantasy where you know clearly, and this might not make sense, I don't know. You know how with fantasy, you know it's not real because it's magical or fantastical, or, you know, even if you look at it as sort of being an analog to Earth of the past, the difference with science fiction is it's a potential future often. You know, who knows, in the, what is it, 25,000 years or something, there is at least a potential future where something like Traveller could work. We don't know. It's a little bit more open to, as a sort of possibility. So I think that kind of openness to having a potential kind of makes people more invested in sci-fi in a way that they don't with fantasy. You know, Star Trek feels like it could be a potential future. Not that it's, you know, strictly a fantasy. or fiction. That, you know, it could be inspired into reality in the future. And I think that makes people more passionate when defending ideas or that sort of thing with science fiction. I might be way off. You might not agree. Let's see. Let's see. Frank Bean says, on topic, any chance for minis meant to be printed STL? Less detail and less need for supports. Actually, I advise you to visit our Discord if you haven't. I think the link is in the description for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe too. John has actually had some great success making FDM miniatures of our Traveller stuff, and he's been sending some of them as free items when he's been shipping our physical prints. Blind Alien Production says, to touch a bit on topic of created original IP, it is difficult. I spent 3 years developing a game that has been made absolutely no money aside from the contract work I pulled in using it as a portfolio. Yeah, it is hard to establish. And the other thing too is, like, I've been in this game now for 6 years. Almost 7. 2017 is when I started and did Starship 1 on Kickstarter. I can tell you, as I have told people before, I would not want to be starting out in this industry from scratch at this point in time. It was a sort of wild west. There were less customers in some ways. Fewer people had 3D printers. But at the same time, we also had a much less flooded market. I felt when I started in 2017, I was late to market. I wanted to be printable scenery. I wanted to be Rocket Pig in fantasy, but in science fiction. And in some ways, you know, I haven't seen too many science fiction campaigns that have done as well as my stuff. And I'm not saying that to, you know, try and toot my own horn or anything like that. It was just a case of, you know, this was before, like, Kickstarter was even jaded. Like, when you could still have an idea or a concept for a project and conceivably get funding without being, you know, a proven quantity. Now today, that doesn't happen anymore. Essentially, Kickstarter has become a form of pre-marketing, like a pre-order, if you will. You cannot start out as a new guy with an unproven track record and just throw up a campaign and expect people to put money into it. That doesn't happen anymore. There have been, unfortunately, too many scams, too many other projects where... Hang on a second, what's going on with this? Are these different? Why is this lower? Oh, okay, the indentation on this side is just deeper. All right, yep. So it is really hard to get established. And, you know, I think it's quite similar with, like, Steam and that sort of thing. In the gaming industry, I can see many parallels because it must be very hard to get noticed. And it's really just, you know, the sort of word of mouth following that can steamroll things. Like, obviously that's on a larger scale because there are more people involved in that kind of gaming. Like, there are more people that play computer games than 3D print for tabletop gaming. So you're already in a very, very niche market. And in some ways, my designs probably have only done as well as they have because they do have a nostalgic component. A lot of the market, if you look at the numbers, are men in my age group that have similar reference frames. You know, they love sci-fi movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Might have gotten into, you know, sci-fi anime or that sort of thing. And that matters. It matters where your sort of core customer is coming from. I did have a background in, like I went through an incubator process with a different business and got a better understanding of how you meant to create a business. So I did kind of do a little bit of research before I dove in and looked at what campaigns were, doing well. And it took me time to build up from, 150 backers to 250 backers to 500 backers. And at a best case scenario with Sleipnir, we had about 920. That's the best I've ever done. And since then, it's been a backslide. It's been a slow backslide. And not because the quality of my work has devolved. If anything, it's gone up in quality. But because I think, A, the market is getting flooded with a bunch of talented people all trying to do the same thing, all in competition for the same customers, even though the customer base is growing exponentially, whereas there were maybe a dozen serious competitors on Kickstarter when I started out. Now there are hundreds and hundreds of people, and that's not to say that they're untalented. Are they doing things the right way? No. And by the right way, I mean is like I see a lot of things where it's just renders and that sort of thing. I do think, well, I know statistically, if you have photographs, videos, a proper pitch video, a proper photographed miniatures to show that they can be printed. In some ways you're proving your product works. There are a lot of people starting out that have never 3D printed the work they're modeling. And that is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Because not only do you can't, take you for example, that blasted summer flange. When you started out, you were just modeling, but then you got a 3D printer and you could start to see the results, and actually printing and learning to use it vastly improved the quality of your work. And that is the same for anyone that gets into this, dare I say, industry. It's not really an industry at this point. It's so niche. It's a niche. You've got tabletop gaming, you've got sci-fi, then you've got 3D printing. 3 different niches, drastically reducing the pool of customers you can have. So you really kind of have to make something that has a wide enough appeal that you can get those numbers. I honestly feel like I struggle these days to get 500 or 600 backers. And it's painful, especially when, I've grown my business and then almost at the point of shrinking again. Let's see. This doesn't make sense, does it? This does not make sense. I just realized, yeah, I need to scale these, like get rid of some of these. And I also need to read some of these messages. Okay, let's see. Eric Anderson says, sorry, let's start here. That blasted Samouflage says, I've personally started trying to support new creatives making new stuff as opposed to larger corpos making games. Yeah, I've been doing that for years. If I see something cool that I can imagine for my own game table, even just hypothetically, I will usually back that project. Because I also know that even if I just throw a $5 their way, people see that Second Dynasty has backed this project and believes in this project, and it's a way of sort of paying it back. I've many times helped new up-and-coming people establish themselves, provided advice, that sort of thing. I'm not saying like it's all brilliant advice at times, but I think it is helpful. And we've seen some, wonderful people get started and start producing really awesome stuff. And there's the potential for collaboration. Like I know, for example, that I can work with that blasted Samouflage or Papsicles on, miniatures if I need sculptors for a campaign. It is a small industry, and I don't think I mean, there is the need to make money, especially when you've got a business like mine where there is an actual, it's not a one-man show at this point in time. There's money on the line. But, yeah, there's a lot of potential for synergy. And that's the other thing, too, is, like, you never know who's going to be that guy next that has, found out a new way to approach social media, or found a new market within our market. You don't want to shit on those people just because they might be your competition. They might also be the next leg up you get. Oh, that does not look good. Also, it's wrong. 0.3 should be the direction, but then what's going on here? We didn't do... Okay, so I need to back up here, and we'll just do 2 different sections. Been a while since I did this kind of work. And I mean, this work is not too sophisticated, to be honest. Like, I think many people could do what I do. Wow, why does that suck so much? That doesn't look good. And that's way off. I wonder if this has anything to do... I should have probably merged some vertexes. Let's see. Will Richard said ages ago, for me, Traveller is like Star Wars is like Traveller, but when I was 10, they both came out. Well, they literally came out within a month of each other. Eric Anderson says, it's interesting sometimes to watch you do what you do because it is very tedious and I don't have the patience to do that. See, the thing is, it gets pretty zen, and like I can listen to music or watch videos in the background, and honestly, like with this stream, I'm just babbling on and doing this small tedious work. I don't have to go home to my wife early today so she can fix the horse. So I'm not stressed. It's kind of like the last stream of the year too, so I'm just carrying on. It's nice just talking. Tamsin says, fantasy, it can't be real. Sci-fi, it could become real. Exactly, yes. This is what I was talking about. I've printed figures in FDM. Detail isn't as good as resin, but they're acceptable. So those free miniatures from John look like a version of Han Solo and Carbonite / Crab Cage. Yeah, I mean, it's not great. Starsham says that's gorgeous. I wonder what that's in reference to. Frank Bean says, I get acceptable prints on my Neptune 4 and I'm learning fast, but Mini's design for filament printers would look better. There's not a huge difference with the design. It's more about the angles and the size of your nozzle, the speed of your printer, that sort of thing. Getting it really dialed in. And that is not something everyone can do. Tamsin says, I think it's a problem for Kathy. Her campaigns are competing with those from some well-established people. It's true. And unfortunately, too, with Kathy, the real shame of it is she already has a fairly large following because of a YouTube channel, but she's going in a different direction from what those customers are used to or maybe looking for. I can understand because I really wouldn't want to focus too much on model trains either, for my part. And she has to follow her passion. And I think it shows better in your work if you are following your passion. So, yeah, I mean, the other thing too is if you're working on something you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like work. And I think this has been a part of my issue with Traveller. Traveller feels like work to me. Original designs feels like it's a hobby. There's also competition from hobby designers who have put their STLs up for free on Thingiverse and printables. Yes, that's an issue with Star Wars in particular, I would say. And 40k, that sort of thing. That Blasted Camouflage says, I fully accept that I am not going for a massive market. I know that I'm going for more a boutique feel, specialized product. The other thing too to consider, Blasted, is that everything we make is future passive income. The 3D printers themselves are only going to improve in quality, but that doesn't mean that your old designs are not going to sell well. Like, we would not be able to keep the lights on if it wasn't for what our store on My Mini Factory does. You know, it does a couple of grand a month, and then we have tribes doing another couple of grand a month, and you know, in the end, it almost pays for like half of our monthly costs. But that takes time to build up, and it's like every single model that you do put to market is something you can potentially earn on in the future, or use as a sort of like, from a marketing perspective, you could put stuff out on My Mini Factory and then create a like Kickstarter or something like that based on it at a later date. Let's see. Frank Bean says, find a way to stay in the business a few more years. We're almost at the tech level for 3D printers that non-technical people can use. Camera-equipped AI-driven printers that self-adjust on the fly. Wow, that would be really, really cool. And yeah, it could open things up. Again, in science fiction, I think one of the great issues is that science fiction role-playing games have a tendency... there's some great ones out there, but they almost always use theater of the mind. Like, take the Alien RPG. It's really good at what it does, but it's not built for miniatures. And it's really not built for mass combat. We're finding that out with the Marines campaign. Like, the initiative system really doesn't work when you've got more than one alien, because they basically act 3 times around. So I'm kind of missing a... I know Traveller is... It's not all that crunchy. It's crunchy when it comes to shipbuilding and that sort of thing. But rules-wise, it feels... I love character creation, and I don't mind the mechanics for dice rolling. But after a while, it kind of feels like, is that all there is? It doesn't have that advancement that, say, like D&D does, where you gathering more treasure and experience points to level and get new abilities. It doesn't feel fantastic in that sense. The last time I had that sense in science fiction, honestly, was Star Wars Saga Edition, which is still based on D20. Narrative role-playing games can be fun, but they don't feel like the thing that, you know, has the tactical miniatures element. It's not the 4E. 4E sucked, in my mind, at everything aside from combat. Combat was actually, like, quite well-rounded. I found the abilities quite frustrating and whatnot, but yeah. Let's see. Shadow Liger, if Shadow Liger had more reliable schedule, you could probably collab with him on room layouts. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, we still do need a platform for putting out free modifications and whatnot. Blasted says, I wish there was more accountability from creatives. I know there are people that put out miniatures that can't be printed, small strands of hair and such. I know I try to print everything that I sell. It's the right attitude, and in the long run, you're going to be rewarded for it, because people believe in your product. Because they know it's a reliable product, and that they're getting a certain degree of quality. Someone buys that miniature with the shitty hair strands that doesn't know how to 3D print, they're going to make that mistake once and they're not going to go back to them. And getting that customer's trust again is very, very hard, especially when you have a market full of other creatives. And I agree, it makes things even worse, because potentially they're not just putting people off their product, but off 3D printing as a technique in general, because their poorly constructed model, or model that works for, say, animation or games or something where, you know, it's a visual element and not a physical element, they're potentially convincing someone that might otherwise have been a great 3D printing customer that, hey, this is not a mature technology. You had a go at it and it didn't work out. We're going to leave this alone. It's too hard. That's entirely possible. So, yeah, I wish there was more community responsibility. And, I mean, there have been many My Mini Factory creator meetings that I've been in where people have complained a lot about the few people that are, you know, offering tribes for like $1 a month, or selling, you know, 20 miniatures for $10, essentially devaluing the work so that people expect to pay 50 cents for a miniature instead of $5. I honestly think if you have a miniature and you bought a miniature as a single, would you not be happy to buy that miniature for, you know, 3 or 4, maybe $5? I think $5 is probably a bit of a standard for a 28mm miniature. I think it should be similarly priced with 3D printing because you can print as many as you want then. That's where the pricing should be at. Now, I know that many people still wouldn't, myself included, I wouldn't pay $5 for a single miniature. But when it comes time to buying a collection of stuff, that's an argument for paying, you know, $60 for 50 miniatures or something like that, rather than, you know, paying $20 or $25 for 50 miniatures. I'm probably still being too conservative with that, because I think the market would move, you know, in that direction. Finally actually got that pattern into place. Only took me like half an hour. Yeah, but it is interesting to see where things are moving, and frustrating at times. Totally Glitch says, Blasted is right. It makes me cautious about buying mini models until I establish that that person can model for productability, so printability, I'm guessing. Totally Glitch also adds Papsicles and Blasted are easy to consider purchases from. Blasted is more printable because of the more exhaustive testing he does. Yeah, Papsicles often tests stuff, but I think he creates so much stuff that honestly, like me in some ways, he relies more on the community prints. When it comes to smaller stuff, I'm very thankful for that, like especially if it's resin based. I was talking before about the floor semiotics being wrong. So one of the reasons this is wrong is because the semiotic I want here is actually on the opposite side. That means access panel. So what I'm going to do is just grab this. I'm just going to do a little cut shortcut, which means I can then grab this part of the mesh. We'll move the pivot point to the corner and then we'll move it over. Actually, I need to get rid of this first. So we'll just do the same thing. So yeah, these were deeper because I needed to go down 0.4 millimeters, which is about a full layer height. Well, 2 layer heights, I guess. Maybe 3, depending on your settings. So this is now on the correct side. We do have an angle on there, but it's nothing harmful because it's quite sharp angled. And then what we need to do is actually grab this triangle shape, which means vacuum on the other side, I think. So it's a good airlock warning style, simple. All right. Yeah, I agree that Blasted Summer Flanges, I have really honestly seen, since you started printing your models, they look so much better. Totally Glitch says, hey, it really does show in your work. Also, sell with pictures of actual prints as opposed to just screenshots of models. Yes, that is preferable. I'd like to be able to do that. I just don't have the time all the time. And I think, too, once you do establish yourself, you're in a different position where you're not having to prove, okay, your models work. I don't feel like I need to prove my models work at this point in time. I am not saying that you should have to, or that other creators should have to, but I think until you're actually properly established, there's an argument to be made that it is much tougher. Let's just move this pivot point down to match that top corner. So basically, I'm just trying to move this into place so that we get our triangle on the floor at the midpoint here. So I guess this is a bit offset. We maybe want to make sometimes I just make like a split, not because we want the geometry, but just as a pivot point mount. So I'm actually going to put this here, rotate this up, I've actually got a darker color on this semiotic too, so I'm just gonna make this that brighter red. Let's see, lamb, red stripe, something like that. Oh, when we fix this too, I just realized I'm gonna cut this again. The semiotic is actually mirrored. We don't want that. So I'm gonna cut that again, grab that. We just do a simple 90-degree turn. We can now see that the semiotic should match with the one above the door here, where you see the black is on the left, the red is on the right. This is the sort of, I guess, pressurized door symbol. Let's see. Traveler, that blasted Samuel says, Traveler is a very 70s game design. I agree that the character generation is the best part. I love the character generation. And there's nothing wrong with it. It is more realistic too, in some senses. I just miss that sort of progression, and that when I roleplay, I usually like to be science fiction. I can accept, you know, being a regular Joe, because you're still living in a sort of fantastical world in some sense, with all the high technology and maybe alien species, or, you know, that sort of thing. But when it comes to fantasy, or even, like, I remember one time we played a World of Darkness campaign where we were just regular police officers, and I hated it. Even though I can't do most of the stuff in real life that a police officer could do, I just want to feel more than what I am in real life, I guess. So, like, in the sense of, you want to be able to feel like, you know, you have magical powers, or, you know, supernatural abilities, or something that makes you more human than human. Like, that is more interesting. Even, and that's the thing with Traveler, there's not a huge amount of progression. You can you can improve your business, you can make a great business, but improving your character beyond character generation is where the game breaks for me. Like, and not actually breaks in the sense of, like, it becomes unplayable, but, like, just, I feel like we're missing something here. No, I don't see any intersections. I think we're at the point where we can combine this. Let's see. Stosh I Am says, loving the details you put in and greatly enjoy hearing the explanation of the process to design. Oh, that's nice to know. So I'm not just rambling and rambling and rambling. Totally Glitch says, I would gladly buy a pre-done character with multiple poses, $25 per character set. That's wonderful. But, you know, I also think you are an exception to the rule. And I think it's an issue. I remember when I was in university, and I was in a class for, I think, we were in with a bunch of design students that were going to go on to, they were doing digital media. We were doing 3D animation and visualization, which for us, I think, was honestly too broad in the sense for a program. Like, we should have probably been doing one or the other, not both. And there were a lot, the academic institution I visited didn't have, like, an artistic ability to sort of, we couldn't do a final project based on animation. It was tied to informatics. So we had a lot of courses that don't seem relevant to people that just want to, you know, create animation or become artists or that sort of thing. But we were in a class for, I think, photography. And they were having an interesting discussion about, you know, the value of photographers. And they kind of were, it sounded like they were suffering from a similar situation to what the STL market is suffering from. Where there were a number of people, anyone can own a camera and take pictures, you know, especially these days where there's, you know, so much on social media, or, you know, tons of young people want to be influencers and whatnot. So it honestly feels like every man and his dog feel like, you know, they have the skill set to start off as photographers. And this was not from a perspective of, hey, you don't belong here. It was from a perspective of, that's great, you're getting into photography. However, don't undervalue your work. Don't start out, you know, doing a set of pictures for 20 bucks. Because A, in a business sense, that's not great, because when you get to a point where you feel professional enough, you've already created a circumstance where your market expects the kind of pricing that you have. So if the average pricing for a photographer at the time was maybe like 600 crowns, like 60 bucks, something like that, they're gonna be outraged by that kind of pricing by the time you actually get to the point where, you know, you're professional. And I see a similar issue here where people are putting out models either for free or that they're undervaluing work greatly. I think the Patreon model does a disservice to the industry as a whole too, because, you know, they end up having, the real successful ones can honestly afford to have a crew, a bunch of people that just sit there and sculpt and model. And then it might be, you know, 10 people sitting in Russia or the Philippines or Brazil or Ukraine or wherever, where the local economy is on a much smaller scale, and all of a sudden, you know, that $5,000 a month they get in through Patreon for their, you know, thousands of subs buying for $5 to $10 a month is plenty enough to keep those people going. But you get someone sitting in Europe or the United States and look at what the hourly rates would end up being for that, and you're not in a sustainable economy all of a sudden. So it's hard when you've got a world market, and I'm not saying like there's a wrong or right way of doing things, but I got some great advice when I was starting out with one of my first businesses, and that is like, sure, when you're starting out, you want to offer value to show that you can do the work. So it's like, okay, I understand I don't have a massive portfolio. I understand I'm an unknown horse. I want you to back me, so the payoff for you is that I will be cheap. But there's a little trick you can do. And this works, I think, in most industries. And that trick is, God, this is not centered, is it? Oh, I think this thing has thrown it off. And that thing is, when you actually send someone the invoice for the work that you've done, rather than putting, say you work for 20 bucks an hour, you put that your hourly rate is 60 bucks and they got a 66% discount. So that on the bottom line, your hourly rate is still 60 bucks, just at a discount. And this will help establish a higher pay rate when you go to the next sort of contract, because otherwise that person's going to come back and say, hey, these guys were great and they were dirt cheap, so let's go there again. And when you ask for that 60 bucks or even 30 bucks instead of 20, they're going to go, why has it increased 50%? Make sense? And I think we need to have this form of thinking too in the STL industry. And maybe the way to do that is to set the prices high, but then have lots of sales. So you have a discount code, and that discount code is for 60% off, so you can get that $5 miniature down to $2. Great. But you are not establishing that that model is worth $2, you're saying it's worth $5, but you got it at a discount. And so then you're not going to have this sort of circumstance where you're having sales and losing a massive amount of... Oh, that's still not centered. What is going on? Where is the center point of this model? It should be there. Oh, that was the issue. Okay, it's a little off center. So, sorry, I'm talking to myself a little bit. I mean, I'm doing that anyway, but... so, what I'm trying to achieve here is that it's even on all sides. Huh. I don't know. That still feels off. Like, it doesn't feel like it's really that centered. So I wonder if the staircase is off. I think it is. I think that angle is a bit steeper than on this side. Yep. So, okay, it is properly angled. We just need to work a little bit more on this. So yeah, let's see. Going back to the comments, that Blasted Samouflage says, Traveler is very front-loaded with zero progression, kind of like Rifts. Rifts does have a level system? Huh. I wouldn't have considered that, like, front-loaded in that sense. I haven't played it for a very long time, and we never played it properly. Tamsin says, the issue is that a lot of gamers want everything to be dirt cheap or free. Yes, it is, but, you know, you sort of have to, if you've got quality, like, I know if I buy a book from 3 Alien, who make the Alien RPG, who make tons of beautiful art books, I know I'm getting something beautiful, a quality product. And I want to feel the same with other products. Seriously, what is going on here? Why? I need to look at this on a grid, I think. And this should be orthographic top. For some reason it wasn't. So I want to go focus on this and let's look at it, add it on a grid by itself. So what my issue is, it looks like this gap here is slightly wider on this side. And I'm trying to figure out why. So there's a couple of things I can do here to try and experiment. So let's see. Back to the poses. I think I found a happy medium with having an active, usually combat pose, and passive, at least for individual characters. Troops and mooks are a different beast, of course. And then you go on to say Rift has leveling, but most levels are just small increase to what you already have compared to games where you get to the next level, you get something new. Oh yeah, I suppose so. Like, it's just increased percentages and stuff, right? I don't really remember. We definitely played Robotech, and Rifts I feel like we tried to play a bunch of times. Okay, that's the same. Yeah, this one on the side is not the same. Look at this. So that's meant to be there. But it doesn't apply to every single piece. Great. So it looks like here it matches, here it does not. So this needs to become this. And so on and so forth. I think that overlap is based on where the stairs are at. And I think technically we just need to come out with all of this. So that should rectify the problem. Let's see. Will Richard says you can progress in Traveller, but the rules are in the very back, not within the character generation system, but also not well done. Now it's like studying for weeks and stuff, and basically just skills. I don't know. I do. In some ways, I preferred playing Cepheus because you had. I don't remember how they called them. Like, I don't know if it was feats or talents or something like that. But you had these interesting things that made you particularly... Like, they were way too overpowered. Like, especially the trading one. That was just a win button. every single trade we made, it was like a +4 dice or something like that. It was always, you know, we were always turning a profit. But yeah, like that bottom one's not lining up either. So let's just grab those, move it over. But yeah, progression is hard. Like, and I've heard the argument that your ship is your progression, and that's fine in some ways, but I want that, you know, upgrading your cybernetics or you know, sort of tiered system, so you feel like you're going from just a mook with, you know, generic equipment to, you know, successful. Alright, so these look like it still needs to come over just a tiny bit. It's really almost imperceivable, but these are not on the line. You can see here, here's the grey line, that's our grid. We're off by like 0.05 of a millimeter. And then we can look at mirroring this. Now, there is something to be said for actually leaving a gap on one side. And that is because, and I'm just going to even this out a little bit. All this for a staircase. So it's not as simple as it looks. Let's see. Traveller is really just a bunch of has-beens having a midlife crisis and buying a ship that you can't afford and having to pay off a mortgage. Yeah, that is a bit ouch and brutal. Look, it's a painful form of retirement. Semi-retirement. But hey, you got to do something with your retirement, right? See the galaxy, they said. On the multi-pose minis, I'd be curious of just active and passive standing would sell compared to an increased price that includes sleeping, seated, multiple outfits, spacesuit, geared. I like the idea of hero characters, and I like the idea of, you know, having like 0G poses and all of that sort of. This is why we created that in the first place with some of our older stuff, and why we continue to do that sort of thing. You know, obviously we haven't done miniatures for a while. To some degree, it's just about, you know, planning, really. In that, if we're going to do miniatures, we need to leave enough time so that the artist can actually sculpt. And often, in the last year, I've just been too stressed to sort of deal with all of that stuff. Let's see, we're getting rid of that one. They were the wrong sides. So let's try it from this side. Hopefully that selects the one we're trying to get rid of. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so last case scenario here we can do is flip these, merge these. And I think actually it looks like we want to delete them. Just trying to recreate the same geometry on the other side. Now, it's not practical, really, to do things the way I'm doing it, but it's like, for me, it can be cathartic. So let's just extrude that over, and this time we can keep it on our grid because that's what we're looking for. And I'll show you what I mean that this isn't, you know, ideal. We might want some more room. Let's see, why is that not working? Why does that not close? Oh, cause when we extruded here, we also got an underside. So a lot of this modeling technique, even though it's Maya, and I don't recommend Maya if you can avoid it these days, I think Blender is probably I'm sure that Blender is the better piece of software, rather. And here I'm doing a couple of things that really aren't the best. Let's just say that. But yeah, I just, the technique that I'm using applies no matter what 3D program you're using. Most of the issues will be universal. Even though, you know, setting it up in your program might be a little bit different. So I'm not trying to merge these bits and bobs here. I'm just trying to mirror things a little bit. So in theory that should be in the same position as this one. Let's see. All of this for a staircase, says Brian. Tearing my hair out watching you build stairs like this. I used to BIM software with specific stair creation tools. I mean, this is what makes it handcrafted. There are better ways to do things, definitely. And sometimes I do choose the more difficult path. And make things harder for myself. Not on purpose, but like just because there's a process to getting to where you're going with all of this. So yeah, and I mean Blender has tons of tools, and there's certainly better people than me as far as 3D is concerned. Like, I'm decent, but I'm kind of like decent within a very specific range, if that makes sense. Oh, okay, I see what's going on here. We haven't matched everything perfectly, so I just want to grab one of these pivot points and we'll mix it to this. There we go, that looks better. Let's see. Papsicles could recycle the aliens he previously produced. Ironically, like, I feel like the Marines he did look exactly like Marines, but then the aliens don't look like aliens 100%. Honestly, I don't know why he doesn't just do aliens as in the way that they're shown at this point. I think he's definitely walking the line a little bit more than I am with my designs, that's for sure. I think there's a stronger argument to be made legally that not enough is different. That Blasted Samouflage said, while I like the idea of the other poses, I think about what is the playability of the pose. The sleeping pose is nice, but how much are you going to use that in a gameplay session? It's true, but I think it's more a question of like, sleeping poses can be used for dead bodies. They can be used, you know, that's also a thing. Like, how many dead bodies do you find out there? Like corpses, like murder scenes. These are things that occur regularly in role-playing sessions, right? But you don't see many designs for that. That's the thing. It's like, do you want to get out a miniature every time? No. But, you know, is something being fought over? Are you in a circumstance where you have extenuating, like a challenge, like you're naked and you need to get into a suit or something like that? Then I can see it being more interesting. It all depends. You know, the other thing that we should not dismiss is the fact that a big part of this hobby is just about having it, not actually using it. I would be surprised if any more than 10% of my customers actually print things that I design. Certainly from Kickstarters. That sounds insane, but if you look at the number of people that share their work, there's really not that many. In comparison to the amount of sales I've made. Let's see. I think it was a Firefly game, Brigands and Browncoats, that had two poses and a game reason for using each. Totally Glitch says, I like having poses for when I have terrain on display. That's a good point. And, you know, if you can have interesting dioramas, there's more of an argument for having those dioramas around when you're not gaming. Will Richard says Firefly Adventures was the name of the game. So, there you go. Blasted says, but I find for me, there are times I don't want to have a gun pointed out or out for every situation. Yeah, exactly. I think, like, having non-combat poses is good. And then also there's times where, you know, you're in your battle dress, and there's times where you're on a planet with high security and all you've got is a knife, right? Totally Glitch says, I bought up popsicles and recycling as he may be good to go. Oh, right, yeah, I'd say so. I think he can work a little bit more modularly, yeah. And I think that's why his commission prices are still reasonable, I want to say. Maybe not, like, yeah. I mean, he does good work too. He's very quick. But part of that is also because he has a huge database of parts he can recycle. Will Richards says, I'm printing a Beowulf at 32 mil. Wow. Currently build plate 6. That's massive. Yeah, I'm in the camp that bought more than I printed. I mean, I think we all have, to be honest. There's like, would like to print, that looks cool, want to support the artist. Then there's actually like, print this for your game. And that's the other thing. How much time do you have as a hobby? How much of this stuff can you actually put in a game? When I was playing D&D, I liked using miniatures a lot more. But since I stopped, and since I started playing digitally too, honestly, I've only used miniatures a few times. So it's kind of like a conundrum. Totally Glitch says, my new apartment has a room I can dedicate to resin printing. I have a backlog of minis to print. Well, have fun with that. That sounds like a good hobby. Just make sure it's well ventilated. And Tamsin says, same here, bought more STLs than I've printed, although I have printed a crap D-ton more of the Traveller cargo than I'll ever need. Well, you know, you never know how much cargo you need, right? Okay, guys, we're about 2 hours in now. I have made a staircase in that time, which might give you some appreciation of like the amount of time that actually goes into my work. Are there easier ways to do things? I have gotten definitely distracted by our conversation. It's been good. I've enjoyed talking to you guys, but I do feel like my throat is tearing up a bit at the moment. I'm still going to probably work another hour or two before I finish things up. I've got, you know, some final bills to pay and send out before the end of the year. I was hoping to have the Vampire out before the new year, but I honestly don't think, like, I'd have to work tomorrow, and honestly, there's a lot of prep to do before New Year's, and I have to support my family. So I think we'll be doing the render, and then it'll come out at the end of next week or something like that. Need to figure all that out. The wife is off next week, which means I can just work, which will be wonderful. But, you know, we'll see how we go. Last stream of 2023. It's been a good year. I'm very appreciative of all the support we've had. And I really enjoyed, you know, having a conversation today about all kinds of things. I hope it was useful to some of you. I know there are some creators that watch. And I hope you guys have a happy new year. I'll be back in 2024. We'll be working next week, so hopefully you'll see the results of this, and hopefully we get the slow boat out today. Technically, it's about a half-hour job to get up on the store, so I should be able to get that done before I leave. Alright guys, take care. We're going to wrap things up here. Thank you for being with us. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.